7 dysfunctional, 1 is functional. Anyway, we're supposed to have about 7 or 8 people here, so we'll just give it a minute to get going, and then we'll get going here. Hope everyone's doing okay.
Hey, how are you feeling?
I'm basically okay. I still get tired easily. The sciatica issue is going nowhere, so doctor I saw yesterday wanted to give me a steroid shot. I've had those before. They're okay. But I said, I just assume, this is Kaiser. I said, I just assume deal with physical medicine and get someone who's more specialized. They gave me a couple of exercises in physical therapy, which were wonderful in making it a lot worse. Which,
just remember, if heat doesn't work, ice does. And if ice doesn't work, heat does.
Well, heat is temporary. What I basically have to, as the day goes along, I actually get better until about the evening, and it creeps back again. But morning, I have to take a Tylenol number 4 just to get moving, because it's so painful. And I know the key is movement, but the therapy instructions also say don't walk too much, no running, nothing that puts jarring pressure on your hips. Fortunately, it's in one hip muscle, so it's not in the back. The back would be a whole different ball game. But anyway, so
if we walked on our hands, we could rest our legs.
Yes, we could. But then we couldn't say something's a foot, or maybe we could. Okay, let's get going here. We got 5 topics, and if someone has something else they'd like to add, I don't know if we'll get through the 5 topics today, but we can give it a try. Most of these are really closely related to Budoshin Jujitsu. You know, if you're a different style or system, you're obviously free to add in, because we learn from each other. So first topic is, how do you feel about high kicks in Budoshin? I know they are risky in self-defense. Does anyone want to start off with that? Do you want me to start, or?
I'm happy to tell a quick story. I've only seen one, this is Gary, I've only seen one guy who really could pull off a high kick, spinning, heel hook kick, break your jaw, knock you out. And, he took the bronze medal in the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
The rest of us humans, maybe not so.
Okay. My sensei, Seki, he had a one word for high kicks, and that's called stupid. Because they can be, unless the guy is really good, they can be trapped and stopped so easily. I can go back to a story of one of my green belts who stood about 6'20", and he had just gotten his green belt. He was at a 7-Eleven. 2 guys outside were fighting, so he went outside and, with all his green belt knowledge, decided to break up the fight. He did. He pulled them apart, and one of them came at him with a flying snap kick. He saw it coming. He ducks down. Again, this guy's like 6'5". He ducks down. The guy goes over him, ends up in a clump. And then this guy who did this flying snap kick looks around, and there's this 6-foot+ guy standing at his feet in a ready position. And the guy just took off running. In my opinion, that was sheer luck on the green belt's part. But in any case, my concern with kicks, and again, I'm not big on high kicks. I think low kicks are a lot harder to defend against. They're harder to see coming at you. They take less, how do you say it? Less space to set up and execute. And they're probably more effective in terms of effective fighting. My concern is, and I see it a lot with different systems of jiu-jitsu, is that instead of, I'm going to stand up here and see if I can do this. Instead of blocking outward and trapping the leg, coming up under the leg and trapping it, I see so many people, including black belts, if a side kick comes into the side, they'll actually go over and bring it around and in. And my concern is that that's a great way to enhance broken ribs. And that's my concern with it, is how they deal with the, what I say, block or initial defense. And Seki was straight up. He said, it's quite possible they could come in with a good side kick and break your arm. That's a possibility, but it's better than broken ribs. Everything, I think, which is another issue in defending yourself, everything is relative to, what kind of injury. Very rarely do you get out of a street fight without some sort of injury to yourself, even if it's minor. The question is, what injury do you want to get? And that's really the key in self-defense, is minimizing your chances of injury. So I don't know what else we want to do with high kicks.
Sensei, if I may jump in for just a moment.
Sure.
The simple philosophy is, I'm not going to punch you in the knees, so why would I kick you in the head? That said, there are times when you might have someone dazed, and it's hard to resist a good front snap kick to the face. But at that point, they're so dazed, they're not going to trap it. You can see it in their eyes.
Okay.
Other than that, the high kicks, one of the best kickers in our dojo, a guy named Robert, and it was really fun sparring, because as soon as you caught that kick, you get that look on his face like, uh-oh, I'm going down. and down he went. Just a peach of a person, a third degree in karate, and a great person to learn from. But when Budoshin came to the dojo, he had a new way of being vulnerable, and it was fun. I certainly learned more from him than he learned from me. But we've got videos of our sparring sessions, and some of those looks come out on the videos.
One of the other things I've seen is that sometimes if you one of the people in the round, or whatever you want to call it, sees a kick starting to come at them, they will tend to back up to try to back out of range, which actually is to the advantage of the person who's kicking. And Seki's advice, and I say the same thing, if you think someone's going to kick you, you move in as close as you can get to that person, because two things. Number one, the closer you get in, the harder it is for him to set up that kick to work properly. And secondly, the easier it is for you to block and trap that kick, or even prevent it from working in the first place. And so I think maybe the issue with high kicks is not necessarily the kick itself, because an effective high kick is going to be an effective high kick. And if you're going to block it, with a forearm this way, that's, at least it doesn't hit your head, maybe. But you can risk getting a broken forearm from it. I mean, it's, everything is, And even if you block, you don't want, you want to, how do you say it? You don't want to block hard on, and this is meeting it at a right angle. I would probably just as soon deflect it, which would reduce the chance of injury to me. So there, a lot of the concern for high kicks is how do you deal with it defensively, or how do you say, preempt its effective, a high kick's effectiveness. So does anyone want to comment on that, or?
So this is Gary, I'll jump in. I think you're absolutely right. When I sparred with people who are these high kick, long distance people, all I did was move in as close as possible. When I'm 6 inches away, I can take them down and do anything, but none of their kicks work. The only technique that worked for them would be to push me away. That is, they create space, and then they could do a spinning kick. They never did that. I did. But, you know, you got to, if you dissolve the space, you dissolved the kick before it ever started.
Okay. Chris, you were going to say something?
Yeah. You know, there's two sides to this, right? There's why kick, and then how do you, you know, defend against it? I think the first thing is to kind of define what a high kick is. So, you know, from my perspective and the way we practice and the way I've been taught is a high kick is above the waist. So I'm kind of assuming we're talking about the same thing here.
Yes.
So the second thing is why kick to begin with, right? Why are we kicking to begin with? And it's interesting if you look at any of the old forms, especially in Okinawan, you know, lineage karate and even the old kung fu arts, there's no kicks in the old forms that are above the waist. So all of them are below the waist. So if you do a deeper dive, you know, what's happening is it's really striking, grappling, and weapons. So a kick is just a form of strike. So at some point in your confrontation, there was a need to strike for whatever led up to that. So if you're going to strike above the waist, you use your closest weapons, which are your arms. If you're going to strike below the waist, then you use your legs in the form of kicks. So you're using the closest tool to your target. So when you start kicking above the waist, then it becomes counterproductive. So for sport purposes, like I heard Taekwondo mentioned, that evolved into a sport, right? So if you kick to the head, you get 3 points. If you punch above the waist, you get, you know, 1 point. So because you want to get the maximum score, you know, each time you make contact, you know, you tend to focus on high kicks. And high kicks kind of came about, you know, from that. But from a combative perspective, you know, what we call flying kicks now, you know, kicking somebody off a horse or something like that. Well, you know, if you stand next to a big horse and now picture somebody on top of it, you got to fly up there pretty high to knock them off a horse. You know, the way they took people on horses down is they used a weapon called, now it's called a sansetsukan. It's basically a 3-section staff. And you'd swing this thing on, you know, at the legs of the horse and basically trip the horse or break their legs, and the rider comes down. But nobody's going to climb all the way up to, you know, to knock the person down. So the issue is why kick to begin with? And that's what determines whether you're going to kick or not. As far as kicking above the waist, you know, if it's your thing, you want to do that, then you do that if you can, you know, do it effectively. But it's like a motorcycle versus a car. You got two tires on the road versus 4, so you have less traction. So you're taking a risk. The further you go above the waist, the more inefficient you're actually becoming, and the more risk that's being increased. So that's some people, you know, they're good kickers. They want to kick high instead of punching the same target. You know, then that's fine if they want to do that and if they get away with it. But is it the best thing to do, the most efficient thing to do? Probably not. It's not the best tool for hitting a target above the waist, but it is a tool, you know, that you can use. As far as defense, the same thing applies. When somebody is striking you, whether they're swinging at you with their arm or they're kicking you, you still have an object coming towards you that's going to impact with you. So how do you deal with that? Well, there's no really true blocks, right? A block is like a dam where you're not moving, you put up a shield, and then something impacts against your shield. To my knowledge, and from what I've seen in practice, there's no such thing. So, in fact, the Japanese term is like it's the closest English thing is like a deflection. So you're doing a counter strike to a strike, and kind of like something's going one way and you knock it out of its path and do that. But you never really shield yourself to absorb something. So the only way you can do that is by physically moving, whether you move forward, back, close the distance, increase the distance, turn to the side, and then your arms, if you're using your arms, you know, then that's going to shape the trajectory that you're trying to deflect it to. But if you stand there and build a wall, you know, eventually something hard enough is going to collapse that wall and it's going to come through. So for defense, always pivot, always reposition yourself. And in some circumstances, moving back will be fine. Okay. But if you want to close the distance, you know, that's good too. You know, I prefer actually to sidestep, you know, and do that, because if you move backwards, then they can keep coming at you. And it's like driving a car in backwards. Your gear is never going to get up to speed, you know, so they're going to overwhelm you. Well, if you move forward, that may make sense. But what if I'm on the street and the person also has a knife in their hand? So I don't necessarily want to get into their space because I put myself in danger. So sometimes just pivoting a little bit sideways, a little bit at an angle, allows me to maintain my ground without taking the impact of whatever is coming at me, at least at full force. You know, it's survivable. More importantly, then you have, you know, what we do in jiu-jitsu is you have that blending going on, you know, and you can actually take that and counter that force, you know, and use it against them. So whether you grab from the top or the bottom, again, why grab at all, right? I mean, you're going to grab them to take them down, you know, otherwise just avoid, you know, avoidance is really the best thing if somebody is striking you. If you can't avoid, you know, that's when you start deflecting. And then when the opportunity presents itself and you want to take them down, you know, it doesn't really matter how you grab them, because I'm not going to hold my arm up and have them kick my ribs and then grab them. And I'm also not going to put my arm down and have them kick my arm, you know, and then grab them that way. I don't want to get hit at all. And if I do, I want it to be very, very minimal, you know, impact, because yeah, arm is better than your rib, but that breaks too. You know, that can get injured too. So, you know, that's kind of it. It's just a tool, and it works better for sport. You know, for self-defense, you know, if you can use it, you use it. I mean, you know, what are you wearing too, right? If, you know, when I go to work, I wear a suit, you know, so I got leather shoes on and I got a suit pants on. I'm not going to kick, preferably at all, you know, and if I do, it's certainly not going to be a high kick.
Okay. So, anything else on high kicks, or
just one thing, Professor? Are you seeing me and hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. So in the early 2000s, I decided that I wanted to get a kicking art, at least to black belt level, just as a supplement to my jiu-jitsu. And I went through the ATA Taekwondo curriculum over time. And the instructor in the school was also a friend outside of the school, and he knew I practiced classical oriented jiu-jitsu. And so as I was learning up to black belt in that system, they asked about how would jiu-jitsu respond to various things. And I noticed that there was an evolution in that particular school's approach to two kicks based on jiu-jitsu's idea of if we have to close the gap, and that's the only response to the kick that seems to work, then we're going to try to control and drop you. And as Chris said, if you're going to get hit, you're going to throw them. And I noticed two things, that the chambering of a front snap kick, and the chambering of a round kick became much more aggressive, so that the Taekwondo students over time saw their kick as first a knee strike, then a kick. And it made it very difficult to close the gap with someone who was consciously saying, when I bring my knee up, if I don't get my foot out, that's okay. My knee's coming up and I'm still going to hurt you if you close the gap. And so it was this back and forth of, okay, so we do this, you do that. Now it's a different approach, and everything became very weaponized, I guess is what I would say. That was an interesting development.
Okay. And that's why when I don't know, Seki would, how do you say it? We could do a cross block if we wanted to block a kick aggressively straight on. But his preference, as Chris has said, was to sidestep slightly so that you were out of the direction of the kick itself, and come in from the side and trap or what have you, and thereby trap the leg, and then throw the person with whatever you wanted, or do whatever other technique you wanted to do after the trap. But coming into the knee with the knee first is an effective counter to someone moving in close, because many times moving in close. Am I in the center of the screen for any of you, or is TJ Thomas still in the center?
You are.
We're in the center.
I'm in the center. Okay, so this is working well. The key for any type of kick, as Chris emphasized, or any type of attack or hit or whatever you want to call it, is to get out of the way of the direction of the hit or kick. And whether you use a deflection or try a juji or cross block, which is relatively safe if you do it correctly. I saw one of my brown belts block a kick in a demo, and he unfortunately, I don't know why brown belts make stupid mistakes. That seems to be where people, that seems to be where, I don't know how many of you have had it, but that seems to be where the student gets their injury, and then common sense prevails after that. He did a cross block. His fingers were open. He broke 2 or 3 fingers on each hand. They took him to St. Joe's in Burbank. Once they got the fractures taken care of, they discovered that 2 of his fingers also had dislocations. So they had to go back and relocate his fingers. But self-defense techniques have to be done correctly. And blocks or deflections or your footwork has to be done correctly if you really wanted to protect you. And that was his learning experience. Mine was when I was a first-degree black belt, and Seki had me teach a class, and some little 10-year-old kid put me in an arm bar, and I wanted to see what would happen if I resisted. and I dislocated my elbow. And Seki chewed me out for months after that whenever I showed up in class. But in any case, you know, all of these things have to be done correctly to work, and we know that. Okay, it's hard to get students to figure that out until someone, you know, until I'm sure most of us have had a learning experience. Anybody has made it this far on the up the trail and has not been injured?
Oh,
and I usually say out of our own stupidity.
Every time. Every time.
Every time. I mean, it's just, you know, to me, it's part of the, and I tell my students up front, I said, at some point you're going to get injured because you're going to get overconfident in yourself. But
may I pose a question to
sure.
the group, Sensei? We're talking about sidestepping to avoid kicks. We're also talking about closing to avoid kicks. I'm going to throw a question out. How can you do both at the same time?
Sidestep and what?
And close.
You really can't sidestep and close at the same. I don't think you can sidestep and close at the same time.
Oh, yes, you can. You circle around them and end up behind them.
Well, then you're doing some pivoting. See, now,
well,
now we're getting picky.
Well, okay.
But what I'm going to throw out there is this: that when my experience sparring, the person I would least like to spar against, unless I just want to lose consistently, is a boxer. Footwork, professional boxer. I mean, their footwork is amazing. And the way that I experience sidestepping and closing at the same time is to go diagonally. So I'm closing, but I'm also going to their weak side, away from their power hand. And once I'm there, they're a sitting duck. And I've had boxers do this to me so many times. And once they're there, my weapons are largely negated. And I'm at their
mercy.
Mercy, yeah, mercy's a good word. That's what you. So, having had that done to me successfully so many times, I am a proponent of diagonal movement, because at that way, what I feel like I'm doing is sidestepping and closing at the same time. Diagonal footwork, and it's so simple. You just got to make sure you're not moving into their power hand when you do it, because that's going to be a fatal mistake.
Yeah, as long as now we're sidestepping diagonally, which is fine.
But moving in really close. I mean, really close to them, so that you then have at your disposal knees and elbows, and also if you you don't want to use a heel palm or closed fist. If you want to grab, if you want to then use grappling, you're in an advantageous position to begin that because you're on their weak side.
Right. One of the things that I believe Chris mentioned was using their knees before they. Oh no, that was Thomas. Using the knees to attack with the knee before they came in with their planned kick, so to speak. One of the things, or one of the weaknesses in many karate systems is once you move in close to a karate person, they're up the creek unless they know how to use their elbows and kneecaps as weapons. And because those are really the two most, I'd say, high impact weapons you have available to you. And they can do more damage than anything else in any other part of your extremity. That's where many systems in karate, that's where they, I don't want to say fall apart, but that's a weakness. Which is why for all of us as jiu-jitsu sensei, it's important that we teach our students also how to use our elbows and knees, because if someone gets in close, it doesn't preclude you from using your extremities. You just have to use a different part of your extremity to attack with or deflect with or block or what have you. And that's how do you say, that's almost a skill in itself to deal with.
The thing about coming in diagonally is that if you come in too close, and they're aware that they can use an elbow. So you come in outside the elbow reach when you do that.
Yeah, like I said, you know, if you know how to use your elbows or knees effectively, just because someone moves in closer to you, that doesn't mean you're helpless. Even if it's just a matter, you know, how do you say, if you know, if they're in close and you know where their trigger points are, pressure points are, you can still get those with elbow pressure without a strike. If you can get that elbow in the right place and just, you know, apply pressure to them and they can't back away or whatever it is. So, you know, you're not necessarily harmless or helpless, excuse me. Okay. Dave mentioned it, so we're going to swing to the second topic, which is closed fist punches or open-handed strikes. Anyone? I have my opinion on it.
Pardon me, just before we move on, I want to thank Chris for two great insights that he expressed. One is you strike at the level of where you're attacking. Your hands are high, your legs are low, and you've got a hip check in between. And you can transition the hip check to the throw. So strike at the left, great insight. I also like the insight if you don't want to close distance if they've got a knife, you run away. Thank you.
Well, if they have a knife, you do not move in because that's high on the stupid list. You want to maintain your distance, and that distance means them extending their arm and hand out there. What is the range of that knife? Even to include if they take a step. I've been attacked once with a knife. That was quite sufficient. Unfortunately, the guy tried to show off his knife expertise, and that was his undoing as he changed it from hand to hand. That was at the junior high school where I taught. Was an adult gang member. But in any case, he did not enjoy the rest of the experience. But in any case, that's as close as I want to get. Okay. Closed fist punches or open-handed strikes. Any thoughts or preferences or?
Does anyone else have a broken knuckle on their hand from having used a closed fist?
Oh yeah.
No.
I'm in that category of ignorant as well. I'm not proud of it, and I still have a misshapen knuckle all these years later. If you're going to use closed fist, you got to go to soft. Got to go to soft tissue. Otherwise, open-handed is my vote. I'm putting myself out here going first. So go ahead, fire away, guys.
Hey, open hand, because I can immediately convert to a grappling.
Beautiful.
Boom, takedown. Everything is smooth. It all flows quickly.
I'm curious, Chris. Please weigh in on this. I love what everybody's saying, but I want to hear from your background on that.
Well, they're both very and equally important. I believe you need both if you want to be a little bit more complete. So, when we do kind of like a couple of hours, one day self-defense seminars with people that have little or no martial arts experience, The only closed hand strike I teach is like a hammer fist, okay, not forward. But the rest of them are open hand. But for any regular type of training, we do closed hand, open hand, and then elbows. So, and here's the difference. It is safer to hit open hand. I'll hold it sideways here, because as long as they're hitting with this area here, a lot of times what people do, they think of the whole surface here. And when you touch with the whole surface equally, it's less effective. And the reason is, if you look at it sideways, let me back up here. The lower part here is connected to my arm. Okay, so it's got my whole body against it. The upper part just flexes. So from basically where your knuckles are and up on your fingers, it's completely irrelevant, you know, to touch with that part. So you want to try to actually push your palm out this way here. When you make a fist, so what's the difference between that and a fist? When you make a fist, see how it's a straight line? So this is the power and the danger of that. Because if you're not trained properly, then when you hit with your fist, I heard the knuckle, and that could happen, but that's not the greatest risk. The greatest risk is your wrist. Because when you hit something solid and you're not trained properly, this will happen, or this will happen, and you're more likely to fracture or break that wrist before anything happens, you know, with your knuckle can take a lot more than your wrist can. Okay. So, but the advantage of it is you have that penetration where you go through the target, because you're one straight line all the way to your body. So this can cause a lot more damage because it has that power of penetration. The open hand does not penetrate very deep. Okay, so it's a bigger surface area, and your energy is going out and up. Okay, so your energy ends just a few inches before, after, where your hand is. So this will have good stopping power, but it's not going to have good penetration power. And that's why you have the punch for penetration. And, I probably agree with most everybody is that 80% or more of the people don't know how to punch correctly, and they're not trained correctly. So when they actually go, punching the air, over and over again, and some lightweight bags is not the same thing as hitting a 250-pound person, who's built like a tank. You're going to break your wrist, and plus you're not going to have any stopping power. So there's a purpose for both, but I would never negate a good solid punch. If you get hit with a good solid punch, it's going to go right through you, where an open hand is not. So, they both have a place and they both have a purpose. But if you don't train well with a punch, then you probably shouldn't punch. Although a hammer fist is good, because there's not much that can go wrong with that. You can go up and down, you can go sideways, you can even go this way here. That's all good because it's just this area and there's not much chance of injury. So that's kind of my perspective on it. But a good punch is very powerful and very deadly. The old martial arts, in fact, that's what they counted on, is there was no match going back and forth. They wanted to actually kill the person with one punch, and that's what they trained for. That they trained like a sniper, not like a, machine gun, type of approach. So
I've got a question for you related to that. There's, in my experience, two types of board breaks that happen, and that's a good way to demonstrate the power of a punch or a heel palm. And some of them are these little thin boards, which I don't espouse. The 1 inch thick dress lumber, which is not quite 1 inch thick, 12 by 12 boards, called karate boards. when we break those, we don't use a closed fist. We use a heel palm, but we don't hit to the target. We hit through it. And the idea is that your target is not just that board. It's beyond that board. So you rotate, you hit through the target using your heel palm. So my confusion is, can you expound upon the open hand strike stopping as opposed to hitting through? I know a punch you hit through, but we also think of the heel palm as hitting through as well. And this is the striking point. The rest of this is along for the ride.
Yeah.
Using this right here, you're asking for problems because you have a larger surface striking. You want this right here to strike. But we've always hit through using the heel palm. And what you're saying is that a heel palm won't hit through like a punch will. So can you clarify on that?
Yeah. So maybe a better analogy is think of it like a flashlight and a laser. Okay. Where a flashlight, you can get a focused beam, but it's never going to be as focused and as precise as a laser beam. Okay, laser is light too and heat, but with a laser, it's very focused. So a laser can penetrate, so even in communication, right? If you use a laser, it can penetrate a lot deeper and further than light, where light, the further out it goes, it disperses, much sooner. So you still have to push through. So you still have to have that penetration power, but you just can't penetrate deep enough. Okay. So you can have pushing power, but you don't have penetration power, basically. So when you punch, to me, it's more like a laser because it does come down to, your front two knuckles or just one of your knuckles, which is a lot finer point, than what you're going to get, with this area here.
How about these two knuckles right here?
Yes, exactly. And I can demonstrate, but you kind of have to feel it. You can put on a chest guard or something, and somebody, can do this as hard as they want. And yeah, you're going to get knocked back. You're going to get knocked down. But with a good punch, you're going to feel like it just went through you. It's going to make you sick. So if you hit to the head, for example, what's going to knock you out? That surface impact, maybe, but if you punch, then it's kind of like going through your brain. It's the way the energy is dispersed, like a shotgun like this, or like a sniper bullet, straight. That's the difference. And again, it has to do with body alignment. Your energy is in a straight line. It's in a straight line going straight out. When you do this, it's like a kink in the hose. So it still works, but your energy is limited now because you disrupted it. Okay.
Okay. If I take two of those 1-inch thick boards and have them held by two people with a heel palm, I can go through them. I would never do that with these two knuckles. It would not be on my.
You got it.
But let me put it to you this way.
Yes, sir.
Take that same board,
yes, sir,
and toss it up in the air and then hit it. Okay. It's going to be just the opposite. It's going to be very difficult to break it with your palm, but you're going to be able to do it with your fist. So that's the difference. If somebody's standing there and has planted themselves, I probably don't want to strike them at all. Okay. I'd rather use, kicks, elbows, something like that, because even with this, it's a risk. Okay. But if somebody's moving around, that's a very different thing. Okay. So take that same board, toss it. In fact, that's how I teach it at the higher level to see if they have that penetration power. Because a board being held by nobody, and in motion, if you have that laser precision and extension going through it, it's still going to go through it because it's happening so fast and so precisely, it's going to split that board.
Yeah, we call those speed breaks. You have to have more speed to break that thing when it's not being held.
Speed, precision, and direction. because, you know, you can't bounce your punch, you know, and you have to be very precise. So
thank you for clarifying.
I think another way of explaining the difference is with a fist, because of the way your arm is aligned in delivering that hit, you tend to have a lot more body support behind that hit. If you're doing the palm, yeah, you can bring your shoulder into it, but this here's the weak part. It's because it's not necessarily going to be a straight line. This is not necessarily, I'm going to use my other arm, which is straighter arm. When you get old, you have these limitations. Anyway, it's still, with a palm, this is still your weak point. And even if you put your body into it, this is the weak point in the hit. So you can have a lot of impact force with a palm strike. I am not trained in the use of the fist. Okay, Seki, for whatever reason, did not place much emphasis on it. His approach was a hit was either a distraction at the outside of whatever you were going to do, or it was a finishing blow. And if it was a finishing blow, it usually was a palm strike to a part of the body that would fracture or dislocate easily. Cheekbone, nose, elbow, backhand, maybe the side base of ribs. That would be a technique to loosen a person up. But I think the only time you used a fist was like to the solar plexus or a soft area. And when you used it, you were moving in with your body anyway. So your body was providing the momentum for that hit, as Chris said, because with a fist, it's easier to get your entire body behind that hit than with anything else. Anything else, a backhand is mainly how fast can you snap that wrist backwards. And as I used to ask my jiu-jitsu students, I said, although you may not want to admit it, how many of you have been hit with a backhand across the face? And a couple of them are, in the past have actually said, yeah, I have. And I said, does it hurt more than if you're hit with the flat part? And they say, yes. And that's because the amount of the impact force you can develop with that. The weakness is if you hit something hard with this, things in your hand are going to break. So again, this is something, you can strike this to the cheek area. Okay. You can do this to stomach, side base of ribs. You can do this to the crotch, a backhand up into the crotch. But they're all basically distractions to take the person's mind off of what you really want to do. And I don't know whether I'm complimenting or contradicting Chris, but it's just that my training approach. That's how the hits with the hands were used, either as a distraction initially or as a finishing blow. Yes, we used the hammer fist. It was, where did the hammer fist go? Right in the middle of the forehead. And that has a lot of impact force if you've ever had it done to yourself. I mean, or have someone do it to you. It does make an impression. Seki even taught head-to-head butts, but the college put a stop to that after a couple of weeks because people were getting basically, if you don't anticipate a headbutt, it can split your head open. The skin surface, and that gets to be kind of bloody and messy. But in any case, that's how Seki used the hand or the fist.
Griffin,
Professor, I think you and Chris are complementing each other. It's so much of, as in so much of life, martial arts depends on what's your perspective. My very first jiu-jitsu instructor was Kenpo trained first. And so the jiu-jitsu I learned had many strikes in it. And I look back now and I realize there was a lot of Kenpo. And it just made a different feel for the jiu-jitsu. So I think it's how we bring them together. Just one lighthearted thing about punching. I watched a movie recently. Had some downtime called Paper Tigers. I don't know if any of you have seen it.
Yeah, funny movie.
Oh, it's funny. Really, it's a wonderful. It took me back to my original martial arts days. I started in Kung Fu in the 80s. So, but there's this great scene where the dad is teaching his son who's being bullied how to make a fist. And I thought, that was great. And he said, okay, take your hand, hold it up to the light, and make your fist strong enough that you can't see any light through it. He said, now your fist is ready to use. And I thought, that was a great little teaching tool. And because kids tend to put their thumb in. And so anyway, get a chance to watch Paper Tigers. It's worth the time you'll invest, I think. But
yeah, it's, it's about context. Again, these are just tools, so I try really not to get, hung up on tools. We all have favorite tools, right? And they're our favorite because it works for us. But not everybody's the same and not every context is the same. And that's why we have to have a wider, tool set. If you're talking about, if your context is life or death, one of three things are going to happen. Either you're going to kill them, they're going to kill you, or you're both going to kill each other. Okay. If you're in more of a sparring situation, or like a regular, type of a thing, then either somebody's going to get knocked out, a submission is going to happen, or you're going to time out. So it's very, very different because in life or death, you don't have the opportunity to feel the other person out. You don't have an opportunity. It's just violence coming at you. Okay. And you just have to deal with it. You don't have time, to do all these other things, to jab and do this kind of stuff. So at that moment, depending on how the violence is coming at you, if I'm going to step back sideways at an angle, whatever, if it's coming towards me, I don't need to close the distance. If I move forward at an angle, a 45-degree angle, I'm going to end up behind them. And maybe that's fine. Okay. But if I actually wanted to stop them, I need to move back at a 45-degree angle, because then I'm going to be on their side and they're going to take longer to respond than I can get to them in a straight line. So, that's the difference. It's different tool for different purpose, depending on the context. If we lean one way or the other too much, it's great for the environment you're training in. But as soon as the circumstances change, you were actually doing the students a disservice by not at least training them to survive in that type of situation. That's the key, basically.
I think, Chris, what you said in terms of using the word tools, I think is the key to every martial art. Is that we've learned a set of tools. We found that certain tools work better for us. We found, our students have found that certain tools work better for them, and those are the tools we tend to concentrate on to make them work even better for us. And I think it's important to realize that all these tools are just basically separate movements. You may have in a kata demonstration, for lack of a better phrase, where if I'm coming in for a hip throw, I might block the hit, then I'm going to strike him the solar plexus with a palm strike, and then I'm going to come in and do an ippon seonagi, and then when he's down, I'm going to either go into an arm bar or I'm going to do a heel strike to his palm strike to his cheekbone, and then going into arm. All of this is nice, and it makes for a very nice technique, but all it is a combination of different tools. And I think, as Chris is stressing here, the key is that the student has the ability, a proficient student has the ability to pick those tools that work best at different steps of whatever the situation is. So, you can train your students to go through, well, you block the hit, you hit the solar plexus, you come in for the hip throw, yada, yada, yada. And they can learn that sequence, but it's a sequence of tools. And what they have to learn to really be proficient is that there are also different tools, and the situation, how the attacker is moving, what kind of weapon he has, if he has one, what is he trying to do? All of those things will determine what tools you actually end up using. And I think, unless I'm wrong, that's what Chris is trying to say. And that's really all that. I don't want to put down, quote unquote, the martial arts, but that's really all the martial arts are, is sets of tools. Now we can also all go to Sears and buy our craftsman's tools. If you can find a Sears.
And Jiu-jitsu is the softer side of craftsman tools.
Right.
It's a concept. Again, I've said it before. Jiu-jitsu is a concept. Karate is a concept.
Yes.
And the concept is to yield. In other words, don't oppose force, but yield to it, not surrender to it, but yield to it, and then turn it around and do that. What tools you use to do that, makes no difference. The danger is when we fall so in love with our tools, that when a circumstance comes up where that tool is just simply not going to work, we are not open enough to try a new tool, and we try to take the tools that we know and are comfortable with and make them work for that circumstance. And in a desperate situation, absolutely, you have to. If I'm hungry enough and a fork is all I have and I need to eat soup, I'll just move real quick and make it work. But if I have a fork available, if I have a spoon available, why wouldn't I use that? So I'm joking, because I use a fork for everything. Some things except for soup. I don't even use a knife, I use a fork. But that's what it is. It's good to have our comfortable set of tools that work really well for us and we get better at it. But when we get to a juncture, or when we see one of our students struggling, with what works really well for us, but it's not working for them, we have to either go learn a new tool or bring it out of our toolbox, and use that, because mission is still accomplished, and that's the goal. We need to stop violence, and we don't want anybody to get hurt, including us, if possible. That's the goal, for self-defense. And so how we go about it is really less relevant.
Okay, I think as and I'm going to go back to Seki here. He said, in a street situation, you never attack your opponent. You don't fight. You always help your attacker. Help them go where they want to go, and whether it be karate or jiu-jitsu or aikido or hop chop foy or whatever else it is. The goal is, if you're using your attacker's ki and energy, you may be redirecting it, but your goal is to, lost my thought here for a moment. Your goal is not to oppose force with force necessarily, but to redirect his energy. And then if you need to, you can add your own energy to whatever technique you're doing. The other thing I wanted to mention that Chris brought up is that it's important, and this I really have problems with this even with my students still, is to until they get up to this, sometimes second, third degree black belt, is to put them in situations where they start with a technique and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. What do they do next? And the upper belts, you can't do this with a white or green or, you know, lower rank student. But with your upper ranks, they need to have training in what happens when whatever you're doing goes south. What do you do? What are your options? And it's a matter of stopping them on the mat and saying, okay, you're setting up an arm bar, he turns his arm. What are you going to do now? And just have them come up with ideally 2 or 3 different things that they could do to counter their uke from, you know, he's turned his arm. Now he's no longer in a position for an arm bar. What do you do? Or you have him, you know, or you've got him on the ground and you're choking him and he turns sideways. And so you lose your leverage. What do you do now? You do a palm strike to his nose and he looks at you like you're an idiot. What do you do now? It happens. I've had some students that are pretty impervious to pain. And you know, they need to be put in those situations as part of their self-defense training, regardless of what martial art you're teaching them. Because they've got to realize they as Chris said, all this is a set of tools. And they've got to be able to grab that soft craftsman tool out of their bright red craftsman's toolbox. And it's got to be readily available, not 2 or 3 shelves down. Okay. And that to me is the key to effective self-defense, is you put your students in that situation. What do you, okay, you know, you stop them and say, okay, Tori or Uke, shift your body weight, move your arm. One of the great ones is initially a lot of my students they'll lean over a person on the ground. And my upper belts know that if a person leans over you and you're on the ground, what's the easiest thing to do? Someone want to come up with an answer? Come on, help me here. What's the easiest thing for the person on the ground to do if your opponent is leaning over you?
Front naked choke.
That's a technique. There's simpler things. You grab him by the hair, ear, clothing, gi. In Chris's case, maybe his beard. Or with Hal Drocious, it might be stick a finger up their nose and pull them over because they're off balance. And my students learn really quickly that when you bring a person down, you go down onto one knee as fast as you can, because you don't want to be in a position where you're off balance. So that's, you know, it's a small thing, but those are things you have to help students make part of their tool set. And I think it's interesting how we can. Thank you, I really want to thank you, Chris, for mentioning the word tools, because we've actually spent a whole half hour dealing with tools. Anyway.
So let me jump in and answer the question you posed. You said, who's been hit with a back fist? I have never been hit with a back fist, but I was slapped one time because I was being too forward with a girl. And she slapped me. And I said, fine, slap me. So, you know, there's all different, it's all context.
Yeah.
Hopefully it wasn't recently, Gary.
Careful how you answer, Gary. We're recording.
All right, I was 14.
There we go.
At age 14, you're allowed to make those mistakes.
That's right.
May I pose a general question? Because I'd be fascinated to learn from you guys on this one. Stay with me on this. In self-defense situations, time and again, one of the basic principles is you want time working for you. You want to keep time on your side. And in conjunction with that, the concept of action beats reaction every time. You hear that. Action beats reaction every time. So if we're yielding, aren't we reacting? And if we're doing a series of straight blast punches, aren't we acting? And if that's the case, if action beats reaction every time, if I'm the one inflicting the damage, they have to be on the defensive. So could I get people's input on that? What comes to mind is when Janet said, when she was doing the sword fighting, that when she was yielding, it wasn't effective. And she finally realized after a couple of years, I'm going in tooth and nail. I'm going to rattle their cage. She said, and I had a lot more success. I'd be interested in people's thoughts on this.
Okay, my take is, and I hate to have to go back to Seki again, was you don't wait to find out if what you have done is working or not working. You go on to the next step. Because if you take the time to see if a hit worked or a lock is set properly or a throw was done properly and they're in the right position, you're giving your opponent a chance, time to react to it and get out of that situation. So if I'm going to come in, guy hits, I block it out, and I do a palm strike to his nose. I'm not going to wait to see if that block worked or if that strike to his nose worked. I'm just going to go in the next step in my tool set, okay? Because you should, if you're doing your techniques effectively, you should be able to sense whether what you are doing is working right, okay? And this comes down to, you have to be able to feel techniques. If you do a nose strike and you're able to get your hand, you're able to move your hand to the point where his head is knocked back, you've been successful. The amount of damage done is irrelevant. Okay. The fact that his head is back puts him off balance. You're clear to go to the next, whatever you're going to do. But you can't take the time to see, is it working? Because that half second or whatever is going to give your opponent an advantage.
Okay, but you're describing something where I have taken action and I've landed that strike. I'm talking about the very beginning of a confrontation where I haven't been able to talk myself out of the confrontation, where I got a knife-wielding assailant in my home and my family's present. Waiting and yielding is allowing time on their side. Straight blast or coming in to do a ridiculous thing to do, but in a life and death with family around, a knife takeaway. That knife takeaway is not going to work in my experience in sparring unless I can use strikes. Okay. I need to distract. I need to hit hard enough that they're distracted for an instant so I can grab that weapon and attack the weapon. Otherwise, they'll move that knife all over the place. I'll never get it without landing some form of strike.
Right. So
it's about the very beginning of the confrontation where we're yielding. At that point, we're reacting. We're not acting.
Okay. Yielding. How do you say it? I don't like to use the word yielding. I understand the word yielding is you're trying to stay away from the attacker. Am I correct? Or give yourself some space between them?
He's showing his cards so that then I can play my cards better.
Okay. My perception would be if I said it's a hard question to answer, but I'm going to yield to the point where I can sense what I think he's going to do. Because, and again, different states have different laws and they're kind of weird. Just because a person pulls a knife on you in California does not equal felony assault. They've got to make contact, which is kind of a stupid way of looking at things, but that's the way it is. Whereas in other states, you have what is called stand your ground. I tell my students, if you have a handgun and you shoot a person who has come into your house, make sure you shoot them while they're facing you, because if they get shot in the back, you're in trouble. But notwithstanding that, because in a real confrontation, you don't worry about those things for the most part. If I know what he's going to do, then I have to decide what around me is available to use as a defense. If there's a pillow, you're in your living room, for example, and there are pillows on the couch, and you can get to a pillow, you throw stuff at him just to get his mind off of anything you can put him from an attack mode into a defensive mode. You try and do that, and that has to do with situational awareness. You need to know what's around you at all the times. Excuse me. If you can distract him, then maybe you can come in and then do a couple, some strikes or what have you before you come in to do whatever technique you're going to do. Or you may not have to do anything after you strike him. That may be enough. Most people who have weapons, unless they're high on something, are really pretty much cowards. And once you've done an effective blow to them, or effective strike, or maybe you just knock the knife out of their hand, they're going to run and hide for the most part, because now they've realized this is not a good situation for me. And so what you do in response, I would simply say, if you have a jacket on, yes, it can protect you, particularly if it's a leather jacket, from perhaps, a knife slice or something like that. But if you take that jacket off it and throw it in their face and then come in to do a technique, they're worried about that jacket in their face rather than their knife. It's a matter of giving them a distraction before you do whatever's in your tool set.
One of the things that we've used only once is a spit spray as you're coming in for that strike. That spit spray functions kind of like the jacket. They will kind of be taken aback because they don't see it coming. They might even blink, and that blink is your time to land the strike and then get the weapon. Otherwise, grabbing that weapon is yeah. But again, this is going back to the basic tenets that we're taught. Keep time on your side. Action beats reaction, and that suggests that if you use strikes, rapid strikes, a rapid series of strikes, that you're keeping time on your side. That's not yielding. That's taking the bull by the horns, or maybe the tail, and looking the situation straight in the eye.
Right. Well, I would, rather than looking at it in terms of acting and reacting, you might want to look at it in, how do I control the situation?
Okay.
And that puts you in a
there's the pearl, Sensei. Thank you.
That puts you in a more, it's more proactive, because saying, I'm not going to put it on video, but I'm stuck in this situation. What are my options? What can I do? Rather than just, oh my God, he's got a knife in his hand. And yeah, you can't just go in and grab the knife hand and try and do a technique. You've got to do something to take his mind off, and you've got to, students have to learn the importance of distractions, whether it be a series of strikes, whether it be a spitting in the face. Hal Brocious was fine with spitting at a person in the face. Hey, that's cool. If they grab you from behind and put a hand over your mouth, blow your nose. If you can bite their hand, bite their hand. I mean, there's nothing dirty in self-defense. Yeah, people might say that wasn't a nice thing to do to the guy, but if it worked, you know, I think that's the one thing I learned from Budoshin was there's nothing that's no matter how immoral it sounds or degrading or whatever other term you want to use, if you have to defend yourself, you do whatever you need to do. And it really doesn't matter what people say or think.
So, Sensei, this opens up the question that I started with about open hand and closed hand, or whoever started open hand, closed hand, because I want to pluck your eye out. I use my two fingers like this. We don't teach plucking eyes out. We don't teach boxing the ears like that, flat hands. There's all these lethal techniques, and there's all sorts of other ones. We don't teach them, but you know, it's both open hand versus closed hand, and the question of how far do you go when you're in an adverse situation.
That's a moral judgment you have to make, and unfortunately, it has to be a snap judgment. I don't teach poking the eyes out either, because most people won't do it because they're afraid they're going to blind the person. Well, yeah, if you poke their eye out, you know, but you know, so I just say scratch across their eyes. Most people will scratch across the eyes, and it's if you've ever scratched your cornea, you know how irritating it is. And the eye will heal, and eyes heal remarkably fast. But they're, you know, I've boxed ears. I mean, Budoshin had one where he would, you know, he'd stick a finger in each of your ears. That gets an amazing response from people. Is it painful? No. Does it hurt? No. Is it annoying? Yes, because people have never had two fingers stuck in their ears. And then if you want to make it worse, you turn your fingers. I mean, if you want to really annoy a person, you know, and then they just want to get away from it, it's not, you know, you have to be open-minded enough and have enough in your tool set where if you have, you know, because if you're in a close-in situation where you're grappling, etc., and I'm not going to get into MMA and Brazilian because you can't do any of this stuff, but if you're on the ground and all you've got is one finger and you can stick it up the person's nose and turn it, you do that. Because this is self-defense, not, as Chris would say, not a match or competition. Because none of the stuff, a lot of the stuff you do, and a lot of stuff we do in jiu-jitsu for self-defense would not be allowed in competition, because our intent, one of the intents is to disable the person to the point where they cannot continue whatever they are trying to do to you. And that's a totally different situation from being in a match and trying to get points. And like you said, it's the same argument about the fist or the open hand. You've got a tool set. You decide what tools you're going to use. As Dave said, you've got this. You know, what do you do to? Are you acting or reacting? And I've forgotten now what word I used to replace those two. Dave, can you remember it?
The word that you used to replace those two, well, you actually had a sentence, and it's the pearl, I think, is the key is how do I control the situation?
Okay, how do you control the situation?
What are my best options? And but the gist of that is sometimes action and strike is going to be the best option, and sometimes reaction and yield is going to be
yes.
That's what I'm taking away, and that's what I'm thanking you for right now.
Yeah, you can go either way.
Yeah. Let me jump in because I've got a teaching question. I've had students, and they're teenagers, or they're young. They're not, and we teach them some forms and some techniques, and they say, "Why am I learning this?" And I have to explain to a teenage girl, this is a groin attack. You defend yourself like this, and we've got. When we can, I can teach forms all day long, big deal, and techniques and all that stuff. But when do we use it and how? And then when I tell them what it's for, it's really difficult for them.
Yeah, you're dealing with stuff that's outside the normal social norm, the normal boundaries of behavior. But what the students have to realize is that you're dealing with people that are acting outside the bounds of normally acceptable behavior. and just because they're acting outside the bounds, it does not mean that you have to stay inside the bounds to protect yourself. You should be able to go, there is no, you have to decide, and then we're gonna have to end this pretty shortly here. You have to decide in terms of self-defense, are you going to defend yourself or are you not going to defend yourself? It's pretty black and white. It's not, well, I think I'll defend myself up to a point and then I'll lose or get beat to a pulp. You can't, that's the commitment you have to make to yourself so that even if you lose, you know that you did the best you could. And I've run into this problem in women's self-defense classes where they'll say, well, I don't want to do this because so-and-so will say that wasn't the nice thing to do. And my response is, what another person thinks doesn't matter little pile of whatever you want to call it. Okay. It doesn't matter. Okay. You have, and even if, for example, a rape situation, people will come in afterwards and say, you should have done this, you should have done that, you should have, they make all these value judgments, okay, about what you should have done and how you should have acted. And it's really all totally irrelevant, okay? Because what you're doing is putting down this person who tried to defend themselves to the best of their ability. And that's why you have to defend yourself to the best of your ability, because it allows, it's all up here, psychological, it's your emotional state of being after the situation. You have to at least know yourself that you did the best you could. Okay, I've had students that have used jiu-jitsu techniques on the street. Okay, they've broken people's wrists. One person, he was attacked at night by one of his friends as he walked through a dark park, which was a stupid thing to do anyway. He did a basic hip throw, and his friend ended up with permanent brain damage because he landed on his head. Okay, stuff happens. Okay, but you need to know that you did the best you could. Students get upset when they realize they've really hurt another person, and that's normal. We're humans, but you have to realize that this person acted outside of the acceptable normal social behavior, and they attacked you, and you did whatever was in your tool set to meet the situation. And you did the best you could. That is so important. And I'm going to make a political comment that may, okay, it's kind of like the situation in Afghanistan. Everybody is criticizing left and right, what's going on, okay? And we can all do that till hell freezes over. But to some extent, you have to let the dust settle, because history will determine whether what was done was proper, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all these short-term pundits in my book, other than they're trying to make a name for themselves, are really just trying to make a name for themselves. It's just, making air. And yes, we all may have our opinions. Okay, I agree with that, but our opinions does not give us the right at this point to pass judgment, because judgment is still in the process of working. And I'm saying that as a history teacher, as a social science teacher, you can't, you start making rash judgments. It just makes things worse usually. But in any case, it goes back to the person has to know they did the best they could. And that's for their own mental well-being or emotional well-being after the situation. And that's why, as Chris said, you need to have a good tool set so that so that you can be flexible. And yes, even in a street situation, the situation may change, and you may find that you have to change what you're doing as well. So in any case, do we want to? We're going over here, but do we have any other things we want to bring up or deal with? Yes.
I wanted to go back to what Dave brought up about, when Janet went into whatever it was, medieval sword fighting, or I forgot what it was. I remember when it came up, and then she kind of dropped off after that. So I didn't really get a chance to interject. But my first thought was, because she says, what I was taught didn't work, so she had to change, kind of the way she did things. And my first thought was that, well, your environment changed. You've been trained in a dojo with nice people, that don't like to do things that hurt other people. So, we're taught to cooperate and be nice to people. And you haven't, usually you don't experience that level of aggression in a dojo. So now you just went into an environment where everybody's aggressive, and that's kind of the environment you're in. But what was interesting, and I didn't get a chance to discuss it with her, but she felt that what she was taught didn't work. And I thought quite the opposite. The way she was trained didn't work, but what she was taught actually did. Because what she said was, I had to adapt and do it differently. Well, that ability to adapt comes from your core foundation. So if your core foundation, is solid, then you're able to adapt to a different circumstance. That's what adaptation is. You're not fundamentally changing, who you are. You're just adapting it to the circumstance. So as far as, yielding or being the aggressor and this and that, we don't have to wait until the person tries to grab us, strike us, or throw something at us, or swing something at us to respond, to something. The fact that they've kind of weaponized themselves or have a real weapon against us and are not allowing us an option to walk away from it, they've already struck first. So we're responding to that posture, to that attitude, to that intent. There's an old saying in karate that it says there's no first strikes in karate. So people take that in a way where you have to wait until they strike you first before you can defend yourself. That's not what that means at all. What that means, it's a philosophical statement. It means you shouldn't be the aggressor, which means don't go bring violence on innocent people. So don't strike first. That could be a physical strike, that could be using vulgarity against them, that could be just orchestrating situations and circumstances to harm people. You know, that's what that means, is don't be that person, you know, but we don't have to wait until something is coming at us to respond. If somebody pulls a knife or a gun or is posturing themselves, you know, against you, and you feel that they're not going to, you know, you tried talking, whatever, and it's not going to go away, and there's no way out. I'm not going to wait until they do something. If I have the advantage, I'm going to strike first, because in my mind, they were already struck first by boxing me in, and now I'm just waiting for the finishing blow. So why should I sit there as a victim, you know, and be subjected to that? So in that case, I will make the first physical action, because in the big scheme of things, I'm still responding. I didn't bring the aggression. I didn't orchestrate that circumstance. You know, that person created it or has taken advantage of it and has put me in it. So in Janet's case, she adapted, you know, with what her foundation was to the circumstance that she was in, and that's fine. Now, if she goes back to the dojo, I hope she can readapt back, right? Because you have, you know, you don't want to be that way there. The joke I always make is, don't wear a suit to the beach and don't wear a bikini to church. You know, I mean, they're both okay for the different circumstance, but you have to be able to adapt, because one's not going to fit the environment correctly. So anyway.
Thank you, Chris. There's a lot of valuable information there. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to, again, thank you, Chris. I like the analogy. I think that, you know, once you're confronted and it's obvious that you are going to be attacked, I mean, the person has initiated the attack by grabbing you, by pulling out a weapon in a threatening manner. We're going to say in a threatening manner because you have to say that. You feel you're going to, you can establish you feel you were going to be attacked anyway. They've already initiated their action, and all you're really doing is responding to it. Even though they may think, well, they're just going to threaten you and you're going to go happily their way. But yeah, once if you know you are going to be physically attacked, you have to do something. You can't just stand there and be physically attacked. But anyway, we got sidetracked a little bit. I got a technique for, an additional question for next time. We didn't get to, number 3 was teaching strikes in class to keep them properly aligned, such as body mechanics, so students may practice safely. How would you incorporate this type of training, especially online or through home studies? Maybe we'll get to that. We'll get to that next week. Although I think we touched on it a bit today. And there are 2 other topics there, and we'll hit those. We'll get up to those next time. But I want to thank all of you. I like the segue that we got into martial arts as just a tool set. I think that was a really good segue direction to go. And it actually opened up a lot more discussion than I had anticipated. But Chris does it again. Anyway, and thank you for being here the whole time, Chris. Anyhow, so we'll see you first Saturday of next month. And we're as long as I have a surplus of questions, we'll continue on at two meetings a month.
So Professor, it will be next Saturday then?
Next Saturday? Is that the first Saturday of next month?
It is. Yes, sir.
How about that? I'd like to give a week off for good behavior. Let's make it the second. Let's make it the second week.
Good.
Yeah, let's make it the second week. Okay. That was a quick decision. Okay.
Thank you all very much. I want to say that just because, just like the loser in a sparring match learns more than the winner and ultimately comes out ahead, I feel like I learned more from you guys today than you learned from me, and I thank you for that.
Well, we all learn from each other, and that's the purpose of this. So
Yeah.
I want to
Thank you.
wish everybody a great 2 weeks, and take care. And we'll see you in 2 Saturdays. Now, wait a minute. 2 Saturdays is going to be
It's the 11th?
It is the 11th.
I'm going to have to check the calendar because I may be on the way back from Mendocino that day.
So we'll wait for your email.
We'll wait for my email. We'll figure this out. Okay. Maybe it'll be the 3rd week. I don't know. Anyway. Okay. I'll get it straightened out. Anyway, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Don't do anything too dangerous. Keep your tools polished. Keep the Craftsman toolbox unlocked.
Indeed.
Have a good weekend.
Take care.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.